Excellent. Well, guys, again now welcome to another Solflare workshop. This one, as Maki said, is focused on job hunting, and I put special focus on job interviewing in Web3. And these are insider tips from your friendly recruiter. My name is Ivan Jovic, but for you English-speaking people, Jovic will be probably easier to pronounce, and I'm a talent partner at Solflare. So, okay, disclaimer, but as I told you in my short introduction, 11 years of experience in international recruitment agency, company in-house recruiter. I worked with clients as a consultant. So I believe that I have quite a lot of knowledge both on the hiring side as a recruiter, but I also believe that I can provide you with a lot of knowledge and tips for you as candidates. As I mentioned earlier, there is a lot that can be talked about and said regarding job hunting, job applications, job interviewing. Definitely a lot more and a lot longer than this 1 hour session that we have. But so what I kind of compiled for you is a crash course in job application and interviewing. And as I said, I trust that this will dramatically increase your chances of getting a job. What I really need to emphasize immediately in advance is that interviewing is a skill. So some people are naturally better at it than others, but in the end, it is a skill which can be learned and upgraded. So what I'll teach you in this session is what to do, what to avoid, to make the best possible impression on your interview partners, whoever these might be. Why this matters? Job interviewing is a skill, and it is an essential life skill. As for Web3, it's getting more and more competitive and more professional by the day. And, strong interviewing skills are what will make you stand out, kind of demonstrate that you're really not just about the hype, but you're kind of want to join and build a team in the long run. And as it says, this is the way, really. Thoughtful job application that you put effort in and interview preparation are the way to leave the best possible impression and increase your chances of getting that job. The topics that we're going to cover. So I prepared a very rough and basic overview of what a selection process looks like. I'll touch upon briefly on the job application itself through some do's and don'ts. The biggest chunk of the workshop is focused on preparing for the job interview and tips and tricks for the interview. I prepared the most common interview questions, the types that you might encounter, so you have an idea of what you can expect. And at the end, we'll have the Q&A. Okay, cool. So, guys, regarding the selection process. Now, what I'm about to kind of present to you is the selection process that we have at Solflare. The way the selection process looks like, it can vary from company to company, but essentially it's all quite similar. But in Solflare, so kind of the first stage, let's say, is when you do the job application itself. This can be either you apply to a job ad that we post, or it can be through referral of somebody from the community or, some of the employees. What will typically follow next is the recruiter screening call. That would be me. The way this works is it's a 30-minute call, and it's kind of like a general get to know you. I personally, and typically most recruiters, we really like to kind of have open conversations to determine whether your experience, way you communicate, your motivations, and in the end, your expectations align with the company. Also, what we do typically as recruiters is balance the expectations of a candidate. Kind of, tell you the good stuff, the challenging stuff about the job and working with Solflare. So once you have the recruiter screening call, what we'll typically do is we're going to present your profile together with our notes to the hiring manager. And if everything went well, you left a really good impression. You have a good skills and experience, as we can see through your profile, CV, LinkedIn profile, whatever. Then you go to the hiring manager interview round. This typically lasts for 60 minutes. Sometimes it's 45, but typically 60 minutes. And, the conversation with the hiring manager is basically like a deep dive, a deeper conversation with the person who would, if should you get the job, be your direct manager. Now, this interview round focuses on your skills, expertise, problem solving, and the way you work. Again, I want to stress that the selection process can really vary in number of steps depending on the project, company maturity, position itself, but the key principles stay the same, and that is that through the selection process, we need to qualify you to determine that you are a good fit for the position. Okay, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on the job application itself, since, well, on one hand, ChatGPT can do a solid job at that and help you with crafting your CV, your resume. There's tons of advice online, but I want to give you the do's and don'ts from my perspective. And this is the perspective of somebody who is looking at CVs all day long. So, all of this advice comes from practice, from real life experience. So what you definitely should do when doing a job application. Now, you really want to tailor your application. I know that this can sound tedious. What am I supposed to do? Customize each and every CV that I send? Well, actually, yes. At least don't send the same resume everywhere. Especially in Web3, kind of good alignment will always beat generic enthusiasm. And, I've seen a fair share of candidate CVs that are pretty obvious that they were not customized for the role. Next, what you do want to do is in your application, show what you've actually done. So, feel free to put a link to your GitHub if you're a developer, Notion, Mirror, portfolio, any kind of contributions, blogs. Kind of the basic advice that I give is show through proof instead of like writing really long descriptions. Now, I'll also put here to do, and that is research the company and role. Although I know it can be tempting to just kind of send your application and hope for the best, but in order to tailor your application, you need to first understand what the company is about, the values, the specific requirements of the job. So do research on the company and the role before you start to tailor your CV. Now, being proactive after applying. I put this here because oftentimes it can be you send your application and then a couple of days pass, or maybe 2 weeks, and although we try to be as prompt as possible, but you're kind of maybe really, really anxious about what's going on with my application. So, a polite follow-up message can sometimes nudge your application in the right direction. It definitely shows proactivity and initiative, which we always appreciate. But I can't stress this enough. Don't overdo it. Okay. I mean, following up has its purposes, has its values, but none of us really kind of want to be faced with 4 emails or 4 messages within 3 or 4 days. So one is enough, and kind of at least you'll get the information like, I'm sorry, the hiring manager is maybe not available or whatever it is, and it will calm your nerves, if anything. Now, regarding the don'ts, they're kind of the opposite of the do's, but it's very important to emphasize them in any case. So don't spray and pray. So don't just send your resumes to every open role without kind of any context. especially not, as I said, like the same type of CVE. Quality in job applications will always beat quantity, and that I give you an ironclad guarantee of. Next, don't oversell or fake experience. For one, the space is small, it's transparent, people will find out, so experience. And second is, anything that you put in your resume is on the table to discuss in a job interview. And trust me, the worst thing that can happen is if we kind of catch you in a lie about your skills or experience, because then it kind of puts a shadow of doubt on the whole situation. So, don't oversell or fake. Don't, again, I stress this, don't skip the research. Trust me, it's really, really important for you to know the basics. What is the product? What is the mission of the company? What are some recent updates? What's going on with the company? And I put this here because it happens often enough for me to mention it, and that is, don't ghost after initial contact. So what sometimes happens is, for instance, a candidate sends job application, I find the CV interesting, I send out an interview invite, and it's radio silence, like nothing. So look, things change, whether it's your personal situation, maybe you got another offer, maybe something changed in your current job, whatever it is. Even if you're no longer interested, do close the loop. It keeps your reputation strong in the ecosystem, and especially with the company and us recruiters. What I really want to emphasize, and you could see that I put research under the both do's and don't skip the research, and that is, you have to understand, a great job application doesn't start with you and your skills. It starts with you understanding the problem the company is trying to solve by hiring this person. So first understand the problem that the company is trying to solve by this, and that will give you the context and perspective for you guys to be able to kind of present your skills and experience in the best possible way in your application. Okay, now we come to the preparation for your job interview. You hear me talking about research, research, research. So what should you research? Now, research the company. Kind of, by this I mean not only the product, the service, but generally the ecosystem. How many competitors are there? Who are these competitors? Do research the latest news about the company, whether these are like investments, a launch of some new product, new feature of the product, or new service. And in the end, also do research on your interview partners. Typically, you will know who you will be speaking with in the interview. So understanding what is their role within the company, how long they've been with the company, what are maybe some common interests and connections that you guys might have. All of this will, on one hand, help you to better present yourself, both in the job application and the interview, but it will calm your nerves and your anxiety, the fact that you are preparing for this, and it will, knowing who your interview partner is, it will enable you to kind of establish good rapport with them. Preparation is really key. Trust me, I can tell you from experience that lack of preparation is probably the number one reason why we reject candidates, especially in the recruiter screening round. Okay, now, interview behavior essentials. So I've seen enough of these things, both from junior, senior candidates, that I thought it very important and valuable for you guys to kind of point it out here. So be on time. Now, let's say if you have a 30-minute call with a recruiter, if you're 5 minutes late, I mean, it's not the end of the world. If something happened, we're understanding of it. But that means that you have 5 minutes less to present your best self in the interview or to ask questions. So not only is it professional to be on time, but it's important for you to get the best out of the interview. Do have the camera turned on. So it feels kind of weird and, to be frank, a bit disrespectful as well when, we have a video call, I'm on my camera, and you don't have your camera turned on. Because it's kind of weird because then I'm talking to a black screen. It's not that I can't do it, but it's kind of a lot better and the experience is better for everybody involved and essential for you to have a good impression, to leave a good impression, to do it on camera, even if you're camera shy. Next, don't forget to smile a bit. So, okay, you don't have to fake this perfect smile, but kind of a bit of a smile goes a long way in creating a warm atmosphere of the interview. Do look at the camera, don't look around. It's on one hand, if you don't look at the camera when you're talking, it can come off as disrespectful, but also arrogant. So just the other day actually, I had a job interview. We had a video call, and it was me and the hiring manager. And the candidate, during the 1 hour session, she was constantly like this. She was speaking and looking on the side, looking at the pen like this. She barely even glanced at the camera. And when we ended the interview, it was the hiring manager herself who said okay, I mean, that was really a bad impression. Why didn't she look at the camera? So, kind of, if you were in a live interview, that would mean making eye contact with your conversation partner. On an online interview, that means looking at the camera. Next, be confident and relaxed, but not arrogant. So I had a couple of interviews where I spoke with candidates. As you can see in these 3 images that I gave as examples, the bottom image, I literally had a candidate who was speaking to me like this. Yeah, I did it. It was a really a huge project. And then he was like this. Yeah, it was a pretty good experience. Yeah, I did this and this coding. And I was looking at him and I was thinking it kind of seems arrogant, like you're too good to talk to me, I like to see confidence in a candidate, but not arrogance. Next, be positive and friendly, but don't overdo it. Keep in mind the recruiter. Us recruiters are typically open and friendly people. We like to kind of communicate with people. That's the good thing about the job. But we are not your drinking buddies. So always keep the conversation professional. Definitely don't use swear words. We actually had one interview, me and a hiring manager from Solflare, where we were quite relaxed with a candidate, and at one point it was like the hiring manager said, yeah, we said fuck it and we went through with it. And the candidate understood this as, oh yeah, we are relaxed, we are good and everything. And what followed up was like a swear word upon swear word. And it was like me and the hiring manager were looking at each other and like, what the hell is going on? So yeah, be positive, friendly, but don't be overly relaxed and friendly. Avoid being too chatty, kind of. Sometimes the nerves can get to you, but try to kind of keep your answers both on point, but also don't be super quiet, don't be super short in your answers. So yeah, we always kind of like it best when we have organic conversation, if you will, a two-way conversation. Very important, guys, next thing, don't trash past teams or projects. Now, it definitely can happen in any industry, in any job, that you have a difficult experience with your past or current employer. It's all understandable. There are a lot of things that can happen, but keep it professional. Don't trash on past teams or projects, because kind of it gives us an indication. If you're trashing on your past employer, it's if we hire you, it's good bet that you will do the same about us. So yeah, keep that in mind. And finally, what I want to encourage you is do ask some questions. There are often times where we have candidates in an interview where, you know, it's best if you ask questions during the interview so you make it like a two-ways conversation. But, even if you don't do it, there's always typically in the interview room for questions at the end. So yeah, do ask some questions. It's kind of weird when a candidate has no questions at all. We'll touch upon this topic a bit later. I'll give you a couple of questions that you can safely ask in an interview. But now we come to the common interview questions, guys. I'm not gonna go into a terrible level of detail here, but I kind of wanted to present to you what you can typically expect. This is not just with Solflare, but this is typically with any company. The types of questions that you can have, that you can get when in an interview. So I've grouped them in four groups. One is specific skills assessment questions. Second is problem solving and critical thinking, behavioral questions, and culture fit questions. Now, we're gonna go into a bit more detail about each so you know what I'm referring to. So, specific skills assessment, these are basically questions related to tools, technologies that are required for the job position, that are listed on your resume in relation to the job position. Or these can be questions regarding your knowledge of certain relevant processes. Now, I kind of gave a intentionally wide and general definition because depending on what kind of a position you are applying for or interviewing for, these can vary a bit. But I kind of took an example that might be familiar to most of you. Let's say if it was for like a, I don't know, community manager position, like how would you track and measure community engagement across platforms like Discord and Twitter? What tools or methods would you use? So, these are typically your quite, in a way, straightforward questions, which are about your hard skills. Later on, I will give you a couple of tips on how to answer questions, how to kind of frame them. But, this is, let's say, what will typically be probably the biggest part of the interview, the specific skills assessment. Next, problem solving and critical thinking. So these are questions where you're basically you're presented with like a hypothetical or practical daily or a past problem or scenario that you might encounter in the position, and you're asked to go through your thought process in solving it. The goal is to assess your problem-solving skills, analytical abilities, and basically how you approach challenges. What I really want to emphasize here is typically these questions, when you're asked, you don't know the company intimately. So typically you're not expected to provide like a absolutely correct answer to the solution. But what is more important here is kind of understanding the way you think and the way you approach things. Here, I want to also give you a tip. You might get this question and you're like, not sure you're thinking. Don't be afraid to ask your interviewer like small question, kind of to clarify the question, the challenge, to give you a bit more information. I don't know. So I gave here an example. Okay, imagine the engagement has dropped in your community. Walk me through the steps and tools that you'd use to find out why and re-engage the members. Now, this is like a very, very kind of general example, but you know, I assume that probably to at least some of you reading this, there may already come a thought where you're asking yourself, well, okay, but I don't know, in what's the community about? How many typically members? There are a lot of questions that would be the answers would be valuable to you to discuss the solution. So don't hesitate, don't be afraid of asking these questions. Now, behavioral questions. I'm kind of laughing because this is typically in a hiring manager interview where somebody from HR or a recruiter is present with the hiring manager. These are the questions that typically we ask. And, there's always a bit of a sense of dread with the candidates because I don't know why they probably, HR sometimes gets a bad rep, but these are basically your tell me about the time questions where we kind of want to assess your soft skills, your teamwork affinity, your communication skills. There's a saying in HR that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So this is what these questions are about. Now, these questions can be, there's a bunch of them, but typically what I will often ask is, tell me about a time when you had a disagreement or a conflict with a colleague. Tell me what happened, provide me with a bit of context and how you handled it. Or tell me about a time when you went above and beyond the call of duty in order to get the job done. So this is kind of what shows us is how you handle yourself in these, let's say, challenging but commonly occurring situations in work. And finally, we have the culture fit questions. Especially with Solflare, but this was with every company, but especially with Solflare, we kind of want to make sure that the person we hire is aligned with our company culture, our way of working, our team dynamics. So, we'll ask some of these questions to hear how the candidate is used to work, cooperate, communicate, handle this stuff. So like, how do you handle tight deadlines? Or let's say it can be, how do you handle situations where you have to shift priorities often? These are all obviously situations that we kind of will have in Solflare, but really in any company, So we want to hear how you think, how you act. And yeah, or, we might present you with, how we work in Solflare, and we want to hear your thoughts on that. So it can have many forms, but it is used to kind of judge the culture fit. Okay, so I showed you what questions you might get in a job interview. Here, I provide you with a framework. Now, there is the STAR methodology, which is situation, task, action, result. The CART method is, well, I'm proud to say my own personal abbreviation and a variation of the theme, which is basically when you're asked a question. Now, this doesn't have to be the law, but it's good to kind of use this method in crafting your answers because it gives like a heads and tails to your answer. So C is for context. Describe the task that you needed to do and the challenges that you faced. So the context of the situation. Action. Describe what action steps you took in order to achieve the task. What are for results? What results you've achieved by this action? And for a really, really pro move, T is for takeaway. And that was kind of what is the main thing that you learned from this experience handling this challenge. It doesn't come naturally, I'll tell you this. This needs to be kind of not rehearsed, but practiced a bit. So that is also the reason why I put it here. Now, you can be tempted So you see the types of questions that I shown you that you can get. You can be tempted to kind of like go to ChatGPT and say, provide me with interview questions and answers that I might get in this job interview, and then memorize the answers by heart. But that's not the way to go. I'll tell you why. Well, first of all, is it can be confusing to try to memorize everything by heart, but even more so, it will always come as inauthentic. Trust me. I can always see when a candidate has learned some answers by heart and is basically reciting them. So what you want to do is kind of think about what questions you might get in an interview. Think the answers through so you have a base prepared, but don't memorize it by heart. I put here the image of Lego cubes because it's a good analogy for what I'm trying to say. The whole idea is that when you're asked a question in an interview, that you don't need to start from scratch with coming up with the answer, but you kind of have Lego cubes of answers that you can then combine depending on what kind of questions you got. Here, I put down a couple of questions that you can ask in an interview because I spoke to a lot of people about this topic and they're like, well, I don't know what to ask. I feel uncomfortable. Here's a couple of questions that you can always ask. These are safe questions. You won't leave a bad impression. On the contrary, this will leave a good impression because one which will, when I get it, I'm really, really happy because it shows me that the candidate is really serious about the role. They're really thinking about what it would be like working in the job. So, what does success look like in the role over the first 3 months? Or, I asked it in my job interviews, or the candidate asked me. So, in order for you to say that I'm really, nailing the job, I'm really excellent in the role, what does it look like for me to be successful in the first 3 months? A good question to ask is also, can you tell me about the main challenges that I might be facing in this position? Again, it shows that you're kind of putting yourself in the role already and you're thinking seriously about it. How do you support team members' growth and learning? I mean, it's great to have a learning opportunity. Good companies, especially for instance, Solflare, we're big on growth and learning. So you kind of by this question, you demonstrate that you are committed to growth and learning and, see what the company is about on that behalf. And finally, a safe question, which, is good for you to ask just to kind of manage your expectations. What are the next steps in the hiring process? Like how many rounds of interviews and how long do you think the process will last? Okay. Now, I realize, although I try to kind of narrow it down, sum it up, not make it too detailed, that all of this information can at moments maybe be overwhelming. So if all else fails, this is what you need to keep in mind. Again, I crafted this, I'm proud to say. I call this the holy trinity of interviewing. Why? Because if you keep to this basic principle, your answers will be good and your presentation of yourself in the interview will be good. So, first part of the holy trinity, enthusiasm. That's your secret weapon. It shows that you're really going for it, that you really give a damn, and enthusiasm is always contagious. I can tell you that people in interviews who are enthusiastic will, it will leave us with not only a good impression, but, kind of enthusiastic interviews can sometimes make my day, and that I will remember. And why it really works is, Web3 especially, things move fast. Typically, projects, companies, they're building something. They want folks who bring energy, curiosity, and that spark that is kind of contagious because enthusiasm will spread on others as well. second part of the Holy Trinity. Now we come to you need to practice a bit of self-awareness, both in knowing what you are good at, what your skills and expertise are that bring value and added value to your potential employer. It's always good to back it up by providing a relevant example of an achievement from your past. But, these are the things that you can definitely do and problems that you can solve. And this is your bread and butter, and this should be the meat and potatoes of a job interview. This is where you kind of shine and show enthusiasm, show how enthusiastic you are about applying your skills and expertise. We always appreciate that. If I can tell you one thing about Solflare, in Solflare, we're a bunch of individuals. Everybody is kind of different in their own way, but everybody is freaking enthusiastic about their job. And the third part of the Holy Trinity of interviewing, no less important, is be aware of your missing skills and experience. This is kind of your stretch zone, and this is basically the areas of doubt. These are the areas where we maybe doubt whether you would be a good fit for the job. But these are also your growth areas. So one, it's always commendable when we interview a candidate who is aware of their missing skills and experience, because no candidate is an absolutely perfect fit for a job position. But what you want to do is not only demonstrate enthusiasm about gaining the missing skills and basically grow in this area, but you want to kind of tie it to your the skills and experience that you have to kind of demonstrate that you might be able to cover the gap that you do have. I'll give you a practical example of this. For instance, my job before Solflare was with About You, which is, it's a tech company, but it's in the e-commerce area. So when I had my interview for Solflare, my boss today asked me, do you have any experience with crypto, recruitment in crypto? And I did not. So what I said was, I don't have experience in crypto itself, but I've been doing technical recruitment for the last 10 years. So I'm used to not only learning technical concepts, but I'm used to kind of get integrated into the community. I did this with a data center company. I did this with an e-commerce company. So I'm quite confident that I will be able to do it with crypto as well. It's just a matter of time. But yeah, one thing again to point out, I don't want to be boring, but I really need to emphasize this. The Holy Trinity of interviewing, everything great, but you need to understand one thing. In order to be able to implement this, you need to prepare and do your research, okay? You won't be able to do this unless you prepare and research the company, the job position, and everything. But yeah, guys, so again, show enthusiasm about applying your skills to solving problems that you already know you can and growing in areas where you are lacking. Thanks. I hope that the presentation was interesting and useful. And now it's time for the Q&A.